Hey, welcome back to Next Third, Best Third. I'm David Fenwick, the founder and the host, and I'm here with my friend, Bethany Hicks. Bethany, it's so great to have you.
Yeah, so great to be on today.
Yeah, this is going to be fun and exciting. We're going to be talking today about the very first pillar of Next Third, Best Third, and that's your thought life. And guys, our thoughts determine everything. That's where it starts. How are you thinking? What are you feeding yourself? What are you speaking, right?
Yeah.
All this. And so if you want to really make the next third your best third, you've got to get a hold of your thoughts, right?
Right.
So anyways, you know so much about this topic. I'm just want you to kind of run with it.
Yeah, well, I don't know if I know a lot about it, but it is something that I've like learned to steward over the years. You know, it reminds me of when I was younger in my 20s. So my personality type is just kind of like, you never have to know what I'm thinking because I'll say it,
Okay.
you know? So that can be good or bad depending on, you know, what stage of life you're at and what you're thinking, to be honest. And I remember like in my 20s, I started to realize that the things that I was saying was like actually hurting people around me because I was just so harsh, or I'm like kind of, there was an edge to it, or maybe I wasn't like as graceful as I should have been. And I just remember getting like really convicted and wanting like I wanted God to trust me with his words. And so I just I started to make almost like a covenant with my mouth. Like, Lord, I just remember praying like, God, I'm not going to say anything that's going to hurt you or hurt other people, and like really watching what I say. And how does that connect with thought life? Well, because, you know, you don't have to worry about what you're going to say if you're protecting what you're thinking about, you know? And so I really still do speak what I think, but I've really learned to really focus on what I'm thinking, on what is pure and what is lovely as much as possible. Like I'm really, really protect what is going on inside between my ears, right? Like, because again, we know that our words can create worlds, so to speak. But before you creating the world you want to live in, it starts with that thought life.
Yeah.
It starts with, what are you focusing on? What are you meditating on? And so, you know, people talk a lot about meditation, like, you know, you kind of have a picture of somebody like sitting, you know, in a position and emptying their mind. But really, truly, meditation is, what are you rehearsing over and over and over again? What thought are you rehearsing? Because that's what you're actually meditating on. I don't think people realize when they entertain an anxious thought or a negative thought, it's actually becomes meditation. Because meditation and even in like the ancient, you know, like the Bible, meditation is actually like a cow chewing cud, like you're just eating it over and over. They have like 6 stomachs or something. Yeah. So it's kind of that picture where you're chewing on something so much that it becomes a part of you.
Right.
And so this is why what you think about is absolutely a catalyst to the kind of life you want to live. Because if you're not protecting at the very first, like inner world, everything flows from what's inside.
That's right.
Everything flows.
That's right.
And so what kind of a world do you want to live in?
Right.
You know?
You know, the ancient text says, out of the abundance of a heart, so someone speaks, right?
Yeah.
Everyone speaks. So it's what's in our heart. I saw this reel this morning. It was interesting. There's a 101-year-old guy playing golf.
Yeah, there you
Playing
go.
golf.
That's like the next fifth, best
That's
fifth.
right. That's the best it can be. And he was being interviewed, and this guy asked him, he says, what one piece of advice would you give? And he sat there and he thought, and he said, think before you speak.
Wow. Yeah.
And I was thinking, wow, that is, I mean, it's simple, but it's so true, right?
Right. Yeah.
We did an episode, Ron Adkins and I did, about where your attention is, there your heart will be also. And he came up with this. He says, attention is the currency of heaven, right? And it's so true, because it's what you're paying attention to, what you're thinking about, what you're coming into agreement with. Right. That is such power.
Right. Yeah. And I think too, like one of the things that we do in our trainings, one of the things we communicate to people is like, you don't just think your thoughts, you hear your thoughts. So when a thought comes to you, you actually are not just thinking it, you often are listening to it. And we all know that the voice you listen to is the voice, and the voice you pay attention to is the voice that you're going to act upon. And so I think it's important too, even for our listeners today, that we realize not every thought we think is our thought. You know what I mean? Like there are thoughts that we think, but there are very real forces out there, spiritual forces, you know? And I believe, and I know you do too, like we believe that God is speaking, that he's a good God, he's a loving Father, but there are some other forces out there that are forces of darkness. That's and they'll introduce thoughts. You know, it reminds me of when my daughter was in 8th grade, she was at a school. And, you know, my kids are, you know, they came from like a stable home and they grew up really happy. And one day my daughter came home and she's like, Mom, I'm having thoughts of suicide. Really? And I was like, that is not her. No. That she's never even like, she's not profiled for that or anything like that. And so I started to ask her questions. I'm like, hey, is there someone in your class that you know is actually struggling with thoughts of suicide? And she said, actually, yeah, there's this little boy, Tommy, you know, whatever his name was, and he's communicated that. I'm like, well, that's what we don't realize is those thoughts can come from forces of darkness that are actually in an atmosphere, and they're looking for a landing place. Wow. And what that means is they're looking for a place of agreement. And so I was able to help her and say, that's actually not your thought. That's not God's thought for you. That's actually not coming from you. Yeah. That's looking for you to come into agreement that, yes, I am suicidal or whatever. And I'm not saying that like those thoughts don't come from necessarily people that are struggling. I'm just saying in this case, I knew that wasn't her thought. Sure. And me being able as her mother to help her recognize that's not my thought and I don't have to come into agreement with it, actually allowed her to break agreement, and that never came back up again. That's ever. So good. So again, realizing, I think not only do we have our own thoughts and we are the gatekeepers of our thought life. No one else is going to do it for you. Right. I think people don't realize that. And so, but also realizing that we're not the only ones introducing thoughts into our mind. Yeah. You know, again, God, I believe, is speaking his good thoughts towards us. In fact, as you said, like the ancient text, it says, for I know the thoughts I have for you. They're plans for good, for a future and a hope. Right. And so I believe that when God is speaking, he's speaking thoughts of a future and a hope to us. But then there is, again, the enemy that doesn't want us to think, because he's looking for our agreement. This is why thought life is so important, because what you come into agreement with will manifest in your life. That's right. That's right. You know, as you're speaking, I'm thinking about how when we start to come into agreement, right? When we start to, we empower it, truly empower what we're thinking, right? And it comes into action. When I try to encourage men, I realize so often that the randomness of things coming at them, right? We think, well, there's spiritual thoughts, but there's just random junk out there in the world and just coming at you all the time. And it's like, is this really what you have to be intentional. Right. You know? Yeah. You got to be intentional. It's funny because even though I've been in ministry for 30 years, it really has been in the last 7 or 8 years that I've really understood the power of my thoughts. Yeah. It's taken a long time, right? Yeah. And it's like going, wait a minute, I don't have to be thinking this way. Right. You know, I've got power. You know, there's a scripture says, take every thought captive. And I'm looking at that different. So I for a long time, I thought, well, take those negative thoughts captive and lock them up. Right, right. But instead, I'm going to take the positive thoughts captive. Oh, that's good. Right? I like that. I'm going to put those under lock and key, that I'm going to hold on to them, right? That's so good. And that's changing my perspective. Right. And it's one of the reasons that I'm doing this podcast. It's one of the reasons that I've been in acting classes. I'm taking positive thoughts and I'm putting them to action. Yeah, I think that's the key. And then you've probably seen how those focusing on those positive thoughts or those things that really God is speaking has really impacted your life, right? Like I know for me, like I really highly value peace. That's like a core value in me. And so for me, it's like like peace is a person. It's not just a feeling. It's,
Right.
I believe it's God, it's the Lord. And so just even like, what does that look like? Focusing on peace. So, a lot of times people think like peace is the absence of chaos, but it's not. It's actually the ability to be internally in your thought life so at rest, so at peace, regardless of the swirl that's happening outside of you, because you recognize that what's in you is actually greater than what's outside of you. And then you also know that what's in you, you release the atmosphere you carry. So if you want an atmosphere of peace in the world around you, you actually have to steward that peace internally. You have to steward that life internally.
Yeah.
And so there's ways to like learn how to do that. I mean, obviously learning to trust, learning to rest, learning to, like you said, taking the good thoughts captive too. And for some people, I get it. Like we live in this social media world right now where it's like, it is trying to take our thoughts captive. Like there's so much information coming at us right now. We have more information than we actually have ability to walk out.
Absolutely.
And what that can do, it's not always just the bad thoughts or the good thoughts. It's the crowded thoughts. You know what I mean? To keep us from thinking the things that are bringing life.
Right.
And so we have to like learn even to protect what we're looking at, because those introduce new thoughts that maybe we're not supposed to be meditating on, or maybe it's like a traffic jam, in a sense, that's like cluttering up our mind so that we don't have the ability to actually think upon the things that are bringing life.
That's so good you bring that up, because I think what happens so often is we get all this, like say, this barrage of thoughts, and it really kind of handicaps you, right, in so many ways. Because I know with guys that I'm working with all the time is they're so busy, their life is so full, right? That they're still working, they've got kids, there are all these different challenges, and they find themselves being in a situation where they say, "Hey, I just need to get on the computer. I just need to do this." And there's nothing wrong. We all do stuff like that, right?
Yeah.
But if you're not intentional, see, and that's a big thing that we talk about here all the time, Bethany, is I want the guys to examine their thought life.
Yeah.
Right? And then take honest appraisal. Am I really, really building? Am I building towards something?
Right.
Or am I just allowing all this crap
to
swirl
happen to
around
you?
And to happen to me?
Right.
It's that intentionality. And this is the thing when I want to see guys make their next third, their best third, guys and gals, is that they look at let's just talk the thought life, right? They look at their thoughts and they're going to say, "Hey, I'm going to invest in my future self, and to get to my future self, I need to make sure that my thought life right now is thoughts of goodness, thoughts of prosperity, thoughts of peace, thoughts of just the goodness of God,
Yeah.
In the goals that I have, right?
Yeah. What does that look like practically for you, David? Like, how do you, I know you just said you take the good thoughts captive, but like, what is your like daily practice in sense? That's good. To keep your thought life protected, to be a good gatekeeper of your thought life? That's a good question. See, I'm a list maker. Okay. Right? I'm a list maker. Yeah, you like to check off the list? I check off my list. And so I start my day with a list, right? Always. Nice. And like a list on your phone, or do you like the paper list? I like the paper list. Yep. Yeah, I'm old school. So, yeah, I love it. So I do the paper list, and every day I start after I have my quiet time, We're both believers, so I get in and I'm praying and I've got the Bible and I'm in, I'm seeking God first and foremost. And then I take my list out and I start to look at my list and I'm like, how am I going to get there? And sometimes because I'm still a pastor and I'm also in real estate, and I've got the podcast and all these different things that I'm doing, I have to look at that and I have to make declarations like today I'm going to accomplish this today. Right. I'm going to make a difference in so-and-so if I'm having meetings. I actually take thoughts about that person. I had breakfast with a guy who's going through a lot of trouble today, and I went in with intentionality. Yeah. Yeah. So, yeah, it's good. There's a quote that we love from a man named Graham Cook. We often use it in our program. And he says, when you do by intention what you've done by intuition, you achieve acceleration.
Wow.
And
say that again.
When you do by intention what you've done by intuition, you achieve acceleration.
Wow.
Meaning, I think there's things we might do intuitively, occasionally, like you said, you have quiet time here or whatever, but maybe that happens more sporadic for some of the listeners or something like that. But if you actually recognize those places where it gives you life and you start to do that intentionally, like what we're talking about today, it actually will achieve acceleration to the next third being your best third.
Right.
You know what I mean? And so, but if you don't do it with intention and you just kind of do it whenever it happens, it'll happen maybe at a slower pace. But if you truly want that acceleration, then you have to actually, like you said, you have to set that intentionality, because that is key to that acceleration.
That's so good. For years, I think I've admitted this before on a podcast, but for years, I really stayed away from positive declarations and things like that.
Huh.
And the reason was because there was a stream of in Christianity of
Right.
That I just didn't agree with.
Right.
And it was always you just speak and you're going to get the new
Right.
car and all this
Right.
the prosperity message.
Yeah.
And I came to understand that was just. There's this thing. I grew up in the Midwest, and so if you have little gardens big gardens in the Midwest, you'd put a scarecrow out there. Because it'd keep away the birds. Hopefully. And I actually put a scarecrow into the garden of the good things that God had for me because I wouldn't declare and I wouldn't come in agreement with. Does that make sense?
Interesting. Yeah.
And
yeah.
so I finally started to get to the place where I'm going, wait a minute. God wants good things for me.
Right.
I want to succeed. In the world outside of the church, there's lots of things about positive confession and things like that, right?
Totally. Yeah.
So,
it makes me think of this SNL skit. I don't know if you ever remember the skit from a long time ago, Saturday Night Live, where some guy stands in front of the mirror and he's like, I'm good enough, I'm smart enough, and gosh darn it, people like me. And it's like, I don't even know why I'm thinking of that, but that is kind of like the world or most people's version of what they think of when they think of positive thoughts. But we're not just saying think positive and it's a magic potion that your life's automatically going to be amazing. But we are saying that there is a direct connection to the life you're living that starts in the thought life.
That's right.
And I don't know that, people don't always realize that, that the scripture also says to set your mind on things above, not on things of the earth. And I think that's one of the ways that I've also learned. It's like, if you're setting your mind on the things of the earth, meaning like you're looking at the news all the time, that's what you're feeding on.
That's right.
You're feeding on what's bad is happening. I was looking at the news the other day. I always try to look once a day just to see what's happening in the world. And I would probably say 9 out of the 10 articles, it was horrific. It was something bad that's happening in the world. And I'm like, and that's just one news station. I'm like, when we are constantly reading and feeding on those things, we're now thinking those things.
Yeah.
And if we're not recognizing, and I'm not saying to be ignorant of what's happening in the world, but if you're spending more time on the news than you are thinking about things above or the things that actually brings life, then it's not going to be a surprise that you're depressed or you're feeling hopeless or you can't feel like you're coming out of that slump, because that's what you're actually been feeding on.
That's right. That's right.
So we have to intentionally choose to feed on the things that bring life.
And so often in the midst of really hard things or real struggles, right? And it's, it's so easy when you're really going through the tough times to just dwell on that. And it's like, how do you get out of that?
Right.
So therapy, all these different things, but self-care, all this. When I was going 7 years ago, when I was in the worst spot of my life, I remember I was on a walk and we'd going through this divorce and everything was changing. And I wasn't yelling. I was just by myself on a walk. And I said, this isn't fair. Future weddings, baby births, holidays, nothing's going to be the same.
Right.
And I just, my dreams, the goal, everything we were targeting going forward, it's never going to be the same. And I heard a voice and, it was audible and it said, but it could be better.
Wow.
And I believe that was the voice of God.
Yeah.
Giving me hope, because at that point, Bethany, right inside of me, all of a sudden I was like, wait a minute, it could be better.
Yeah.
So then that was where, when you say in a practical way, that's where I decided I was going to make the next third of my life my best third.
That's awesome.
And I started putting into practice the things that we're trying to give these guys. You know, I started changing the way I was thinking. I started working out a lot. I started understanding emotions better and digging into those and examining those. I poured into relationships, you know, which is a big thing too, right?
Huge.
And then I just started to dig down into the fifth pillar, which was the lies that I believe about myself. You know, those things you come in partnership, you know, partner with, and we'll talk about that later or another time. But it's 100% right. Is the decisions you make and what you think on, it can actually change the course of your life.
Yeah.
Or I could have just sat there and said, my life sucks.
Yeah.
You know, it's horrible, you know, and I could have stayed there for a long time. And then what ends up happening is you end up medicating. Yeah. Because that's the only way to get out.
Right. Yeah, exactly. You get stuck. You put yourself in a stuck place because you haven't chosen to take those thoughts captive or to start focusing. And, you know, it isn't just like taking, I mean, I love that idea of taking the good thoughts captive. A lot of times people think, well, the negative thoughts I'll take captive. But I mean, I think the key is, again, like what we're talking about, is you break agreement with those and you choose to walk through like thinking whatever's pure, whatever's lovely, whatever's beautiful. Like, you know, the scripture says, think on these things. And you have to make that a lifestyle. Yeah. If you see people that are like, man, their life just seems always so great. They always seem at peace. They always seem at rest. You know, it's like, I guarantee you they have learned something about choosing to be a gatekeeper of life for their thoughts and not entertain thoughts of darkness or hopelessness or things like that. And it is a key. It is a massive key to living that next third as your best third. Yeah. I don't think you can do it without it.
I don't either. And, you know, both of us agree on something. It's that the things we're facing, that's a reality. Right. But there's a greater reality.
Greater reality, 100%.
And so much of that is birthed in your thoughts.
Yes, absolutely.
So if you said it's a key to making the next third the best third, what would you say are a couple things? If there's people out there, let's say they're, you know, 50s, in their 50s, and they're looking at their future life, you know, or maybe they're not even examining it. Right. But, you know, they're partnering. So many times people partner with the doom and gloom. Like, I'm going to get old and die.
Yeah. You know? I have people in my life that actually are living to die. Yeah. Like, I'm like, wow. It's like, what? You're still so young. Yeah, yes.
Yeah. So how would, in a practical way, what would you say to somebody, some real practical steps to change the way you're thinking?
Yeah, I think practically kind of the two things that come to my mind right now is, you know, part of the acceleration of like kind of setting your mind on things above and really walking in a healthy thought life is how you think about other people. And so specifically people that have hurt you, that have betrayed you, things like that, like you actually have to come to a place of releasing them and choosing to forgive them and not put expectation on the outcome, you know. And I'm not talking about abusive situations or things like that. You definitely have to make decisions to get out of that. But I am saying, like, if it's something that happened in the past and you're still holding on to offense or unforgiveness or bitterness, like you will not be able to move into your next best third if you're holding on to those things, because those thoughts are they're going to like, it's almost the picture I'm getting is somebody who's trying to swim, but something keeps pulling them under the water. It's actually like anchors on your feet that's actually pulling you down. And I actually feel like that's for some of you here, that you're trying to tread water. So, I mean, you feel like you keep getting pulled under. It's actually because there is some bitterness. There is some unforgiveness. And I'm not saying that what they did to you was right. It was probably very wrong. Yeah. But, you know, we've all heard that saying. It's like to hold unforgiveness against someone is like when you're drinking poison and hoping the other person dies, you know, or gets affected. And it's like, it's actually going to release you into your next third to release them. So I think that's super important in how you choose to look at other people. And then I think another practical thing would be, honestly, to find something that you love to do. Like find a hobby, like look at the gifts that you have, look at desires that you even had. Like, you know, I know of a friend, she was in her mid 70s and she's always full of life, but she's like, I'm going to learn how to play the piano. I've always wanted to learn how to play the piano. And so she's taking piano lessons. It's like, she's not letting life shut her down just because of her age. She's actually still learning and growing. And when you start to do that, you're actually training your mind to actually learn something new. You're growing, but you're also doing something you love, which is, again, another great focus for what you're setting your mind on, which can bring hope. And you never know the connections you'll make when you step into, like you're like, I want to go into learning how to act. Like that opened up a whole other world to you that you would never have done if you're like, oh, I'm too old to be an actor.
Right.
Or, I'm too old to step into something like that. Like, no, like you never know what the outcome of that will be. Maybe you won't be an Oscar winner. Maybe you will. You'll never know unless you actually step into it. But the people, the connections, the skills. And I have seen over and over again, when you say yes to something, there's so many times that it opens other doors that you never would have walked through if you hadn't stepped into this one. And so again, I think it's a way of just like, I am not going to shrink back in this season of my life. I am moving forward. I'm going to find something, whether it's serving. You know, I have a friend right now who is, you know, Regina. She's like, she loves to serve people. Yeah. And she's like, I'm going to go to Kerrville, which is where there's just those massive floods. And she is like going there and she's literally scrubbing floors to serve right now for the next 3 days at Camp Mystic, which is where all those tragedies happen, because that's something she loves to do, but it felt like significance to her. Like, and that may be like, well, how is that connected to your thought life? It's like, because you're stepping into something you were made for, you know, and that helps redirect in a practical way what you're focusing on. You know?
Yeah, that is so good. Man, that's so good. She's down there doing that.
I know.
That is amazing.
Yeah.
You know, when I was a boy, I grew up Catholic. I went to Catholic school. And I still remember the nuns yelling at me because I was a daydreamer. They would say, you know, you're just a daydreamer and everything. You know, I've come to realize that what you're talking about is us kind of having fun and daydreaming.
Yes.
You know?
Yeah.
And daydreaming's different than dreaming.
Yeah.
Daydreaming is intentional. You know, when you were a little kid and you were pretending to be this and pretending to be that and playing this, you were basically daydreaming. You were coming up with a scenario that was fun and you stepped into it. Yep. And it was role play and fantasy and fun, but whatever it was, it came from the daydream, the what if. You know, I'm going to do this, right? You know, I remember being out in the backyard by myself with a baseball and a bat, and I'd be pretending I'm hitting a home run, you know, to win the World Series things like that. But see, that's the thing I try to get guys to do is to start daydreaming. Yeah. Because daydreaming's intentional and it connects to your thoughts. Absolutely. What can I do? Right. What would I like to do? What would be fun to do, right?
Yes. Yeah, the power of imagination. Yeah. You know, like if you can see it, you can have it. And I think that's where, like, even just meaning like, if you can see yourself, you know, walking on a stage and speaking or whatever, then you kind of like move towards that. You know, I was actually just thinking about like things I used to daydream about or think I wanted to do when I was a kid. Like, I mean, you're going to laugh at this, but like, I mean, every 13-year-old girl, I'm like, I want to be a Christian model for Jesus, you know, until I realized there wasn't really a lot of those out there. And so, and then I also wanted to be a newscaster for a while. Yeah. And then I realized like, you know, it seemed like a lot of the news given is just actually so negative, and I'm just don't want to be like giving bad news out. And then the other thing I was interested in being was like a missionary aviation pilot, which is like, you know, a pilot flying into the, you know, they fly into the jungle and they have like a short strip of land and you land and take off. And I remember going up with a friend and his dad who had a plane, and, you know, I was like testing it out. I was 16. I'm like, nope, I don't want to be a pilot. But the funny thing is now when I look at my life now, I actually see those things I daydreamed. They're actually woven into what I'm doing right now. Like I am, I'm an author. I'm a speaker. I'm a trainer, like a prophetic trainer. We teach people how to recognize and respond to God's voice. But it's like, I have this like kind of like the Christian model, like as a kingdom mother, it's like I'm modeling for women what that can look like.
That's right.
As a newscaster, like we actually train and teach online in front of people all week long, all the time. Like, and in a way that is kind of fitting that. And then I just flew home from Brazil, multiple flights the other day. And I've flown a lot the last, probably 8 years. And I remember thinking like, I have flown so much. It's like, I'm not a pilot, but it's like I think I was seeing that I was actually made to fly, that I was actually, there's going to be a season of my life that I was going to be flying all the time in. And so I feel like I was seeing glimpses of what I was actually called to do. But in my daydreamer years, that was kind of like what I thought it would look like. But actually I see the fullness of it now, the convergence. And so I would even just encourage like what did that look like when those things you were daydreaming when you were younger? Are you seeing that manifestation of it in a new way now?
Well, just as you're talking, some people have heard this before, but when I was about 11 years old, I wanted to be an actor. I wanted to be a broadcast journalist, and I wanted to have my own television talk show.
There we go.
Come on, I'm doing it.
Check,
right?
There's your checklist.
And it's so much fun. And yet it came from middle of all the pain, in the midst of my brokenness, a decision that it could be better.
Come on.
I grabbed hold of a thought, and I said, it could be better.
Yes.
Now, how's it going to be better? At that point,
you didn't know.
I had zero clue.
Yeah.
I was still in great pain, but there was hope.
Yes.
And I held on. I took captive that word that it could be better.
Yeah. And it is.
And it is.
Right?
This is the best life I've ever lived.
Come on.
Right?
I think there's a lot of hope for people now.
There's so much hope, but it starts with, what are you coming to agreement with?
Right.
What are you letting in? Right? And then what are you speaking out?
Absolutely.
So
it's all connected.
This is so good.
Yeah.
I'm so glad you came today.
Yeah, it was great to be here.
This is so great. If this is helpful and you enjoy it, do me a favor if you'd subscribe. We're at like 750 subscribers. We want to get to 1,000 by the end of August. Yeah. If you would share this, like, comment, it all helps the algorithm. But more than anything, we want you to take your thoughts under control, to take initiative, and to make the next third your best third. We'll see you next time.
See ya.